A lot of people make a lot of assumptions inside of Christian culture that make absolutely no sense. Here's three. And why is this important? It's important because these kind of things drive people away from the faith. They hear stuff like this and they're like, that's your God? Later. Happens all the time. Here's the first one. The Bible says in Romans and Timothy, Paul, he's saying that, well, he says it explicitly in Romans. Actually he doesn't. He asks, he puts forth a hypothetical question. He says, what if God makes some vessels, people, for honor and some for dishonor? So he's not stating definitively that God does that. He's just asking the question, what if God does that? That's Romans 11, I believe. And then in Timothy, he says something similar. It's much less of an inference that people are just vessels of dishonor. He says, now in a large house there are vessels of honor and vessels to dishonor, and if a man cleanses himself from these things, talking about some set of sins or something, then he will be a vessel of honor, useful to the master. So he's there again, he's inferring that some people, like in God's house, or in the world, I would say, are vessels of dishonor. This propagates, it's very logical from these two verses, that for people to think that God creates human beings just to use them and dispose of them. That's what they say. Well, that's what the first one, it infers, right? It doesn't directly say it, but it says, what if God does this? So this theory gets passed around inside of Christian culture regularly. Well, God just makes some people like Pharaoh and others in the Bible, evil people, just to be evil so he can use them for his purposes, and then he just snuffs them out or sends them off, does whatever he does with them. Is that a God you can trust? Not me. And I don't care. I'm not afraid to say it. It doesn't bother me a bit. It draws me closer to Yeshua, to Papa, to say it. Why? Because I want the truth. I don't just assume that these things are real because Paul asks what if, right? Or Paul makes some other statement. Sorry, a lot of people might not like that. Here's another one that gets passed around in Christian culture. All bunch of evil crap happens to people, and they say, oh, it must have been God. God's using it in my life to teach me something or to do something in my life. It's like, no, God will discipline you, as any good father does, and he will implement consequences, which will be good for you, even if they're unpleasant, right? Even if they're somewhat painful. But that's different than just letting evil afflict you and assuming that it's from God. We would never do that to our kids. What would we do? We would implement consequences that are equal to the offense as a means of healthy discipline out of love, which would produce the peaceable fruit of righteousness, it says in Hebrews, talking about this very issue. That's what we would do. That's what God does. We take our cues from him, not the other way around. So people saying, oh, God sent us all this evil for our own good. No. And the other one is implementing, it's similar to the last one, but it's implementing consequences that are disproportionately harsh compared to the crime, right? And people will argue with me about this, but I'll give you a Bible verse to back it up. And they'll say, oh, well, if you told one lie in your life, you're worthy of burning in hell forever. Really? If somebody's kid says one lie, do people do that to their kids? No. They implement the consequences that are proportionate to the lie so that the child can learn from it. Why? Because they love them and they care about them. Which one makes more sense? Somebody say, well, all sin is worthy of death. No, it's not. 1 John 5, 16 and 17 says it's not. It says some are, but some aren't. Check it. Got to see beyond Christian culture, folks. and get to know Yeshua and Papa, Yahweh, Yehovah, God, Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit, ourselves, so we can get to the root of these things for our own sake and for the sake of those who are watching us. Thank you and have a nice day.